Hello, everybody. Welcome to Frame Trap. On this episode, I am joined by one Brandon Jones.
Hey.
And one Daniel Bloodworth.
Yo.
I'm your host, Ben Moore. We had some difficulty this Frame Trap. One that we can't really explain. The TVs behind us weren't recognizing the laptop, so we couldn't get the Frame Trap logo on there, but Blood just kept turning it on and turning it off, and it worked eventually. But this is a special episode, kind of, because we're about to shoot Game of the Year 2022, which is always kind of an exciting and nerve-wracking time, just because it's a big undertaking. We talk a lot. There's a lot of feelings that come out, and by the time a lot of you hear this, we may be in the room deliberating, and so on kind of right before that happens, how are you feeling going in to GOTYs?
I'm always nervous, but I'm kind of in a pretty good state of, just feeling like, I'll just let things go where they go, we're never going to be able to play everything. Yeah. And I've gotten into a couple of things that I was curious about that I was like, I don't know if anyone else has played these games. And like, oh yeah. So rather than trying to, be the fifth person to tackle an 80-long RPG or something, it's like, oh, check out these other things.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like I've played so much and still have so much to play. Like I was playing Inscription some more. I saw Huber playing that and I was like, oh yeah, I need to dive back in. And I got to the second act of that game and I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. There's just so much to
That's one
mesh.
for me for sure when I get my PC back.
Yeah, I think you would really like it. Brandon, how you feeling?
Good. Boy, this could go in so many different directions, like so many different we were doubling down on like the whole concept of like genre awards and what like different types of awards we gave out and whether we wanted to do all those. Like we go through that every year. It's like almost like the feeling of like looking at a totally different list. You're like, wait, that category doesn't make sense, and for some reason it did make sense last year.
Yeah, and I think once we get into like trying to fill out some of those things, there's going to be more things that just chop it.
Yeah,
but I have favorites, but they're not stuff where I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a tough fight, or man, I'm really going to come out with my claws out, with one game or one category, and like, I'm kind of excited where all of the conversations are going to take us, because I just think it was a pretty equal year across the board, just in terms of like so many exciting opportunities for like a lot of franchises to shine in ways they hadn't before, and I think gaming, I'm just so happy about where we wound up at the end of the year that it's like, I don't know what I would really... I know what my favorites were. I know what I would fight for. I don't know what hills I would die on. We'll see. We'll fight on Wednesday.
I might as well just get into it now because I think it's a good transition into this because I've been playing God of War on PC.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay.
Review copy provided by PlayStation. This is going to sound like an insult to 2021, but it's really not. I've been very happy with and have given high scores to many games, and there are a ton of games this year that brought me joy. But there is no single game where I can say like with a bullet, this is it, and like the one that like the hill that I would die on. I think there's a lot of them that I feel strongly about, but there's not one where it's like, okay, clearly all the allies are gonna like agree on this. Playing God of War on PC, and obviously, it just looking better and like running even better and playing on a super nice monitor, on a super nice PC, it spoils you. But like, even with all of that aside, I'm like, I cannot believe this game came out almost 4 years ago. Like, I think if this game, like just the, small amount of time that I've put into it again, I'm like, I am having such a good time. Like, no wonder this game won 2018 GOTY. Like, obviously, like it makes so much sense. I think if this game came out in 2021, it would win 2021 GOTY. Like, it's a modern masterpiece, and it's like on every level, right? And I think I was worried revisiting God of War 2021, and I was like, okay, I already know the story. Like, the beginning's going to be really slow. And like, I always hate that feeling going into a game where you're like, I really want to play this. I just don't want to go through that beginning again. And that was definitely the feeling that I had with God of War in my mind, but it doesn't play out like that at all. Like, it kind of gets you into the gameplay like pretty immediately. Like, yes, there is some setup, yes, there is some tutorializing, but in terms of like solving puzzles and getting your gear and setting up the world and introducing the major players, like it's doing all of this kind of simultaneously and really organically in a way that is wonderful. It's not like so hands off like something like a Breath of the Wild or like a Dark Souls or something where it's just like kicks you into the world and says figure it out. It's not quite like that, but it balances all of these aspects super, super well to the point where you're just like, you can just lose yourself in it immediately. You don't feel like you have to get to the good part. The good part is all the time, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned gear, and I would think, like, for me, that's maybe one of the things that would hold me back sometimes from replaying something is that, like, I want to re-experience that story and that world.
Right.
I really don't necessarily like want to get into like fiddling with gear and builds and all of that all the time. I mean, some games,
Right.
where like you can just do a completely different play style, that's one thing, but most games, and I feel like God of War is one of them where it's like, yeah, there's gear and it's a good system, but it's not something that I really want to put my time into on a second run necessarily.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like something about like you think about an MMO, right? Restarting an MMO, and you're just like, oh god, I have to like go through that grind again, trying to get the drops again or whatever it is. And I think the thing about God of War, almost it's an advantage compared to like your more traditional, maybe turn-based RPGs, is it doesn't give you the gear right away. You're not worrying about stats right away. It just is telling you, that you can throw your axe and rip dudes apart and so on and so forth. And so it kind of makes a case for it, the fun of its basic combat. And like, yes, you get gear, and yes, that does matter, but it doesn't come at the cost of the moment-to-moment gameplay. It's not the gear that is necessarily winning the fights. It's still you doing the actions. It's just like kind of this other layer sitting on top of it. And I had this moment when I was playing it, and I was like, oh God, I forgot how good the fighting was in this. Like I knew it's one of those things where you know it, you've talked about it, you've already praised it, but to go through it again, how smooth everything is and how kind of immediately interesting a lot of the fights are. Like you're not just going through fodder like for hours on end. It's like, oh, you have this witch, and it's like Atreus can make it so it's easier to hit the witch, and then you're fighting the trolls right away, and then you have projectile guys to worry about, and so how do you balance the guys in the field versus throwing axes at them, and when should you use your fists versus the axe? And it's like there's all of these layers to combat that I think make it strategically interesting, but then like it just feels so goddamn good, right? Like you always have to go back to that game feel where if you can have something where you just are having fun pressing buttons, that's a plus. But then you're having fun pressing buttons, and you have to think about it a little bit, but not so much that it's a chore. Like it just finds this pocket.
We think about like gaming combat, even dating back to like Dark Forces, just like this whole vibe of like hallway. Stuff opened up. Oh, the bad guys. I shot everybody. Okay, everybody's dead. Okay, on to the next room. Oh, more bad guys. And it's like a lot of games are like, hey, that's our game. There's nothing we can do about it. But it's neat, like getting into the like moving from like Tomb Raider to Uncharted and really like smoothing out the storytelling and like even like Deus Ex and stuff, and just like really having the flow of like what are essentially the same combat scenario over and over again. Yeah, I have options, but like I'm still just shooting something or attacking something, punching stuff. And the smoothness from how that game introduces enemies, specifically new enemies, and the flow of the story to like when combat ends and Atreus starts talking about the fight you just had, like it's all so smooth and seamless. That's just like every time a fight comes up, you're like, yes, let's go. And not just like, oh yeah, more XP. It's like, I can't wait to wreck these things.
Yeah.
Throw guys off of ledges and stuff. So satisfying.
Yeah. And, it walks you through kind of the basics of the game, but you learn like how to juggle enemies, or like, oh, like I can hit multiple enemies with light attacks if I time it just right. Like there also feels like there's enough for you to kind of intuitively gather on your own that makes it so much fun. And like, I want to talk about you and Atreus and how awesome that storytelling method is, because I feel like a lot of these sort of more cinematic, higher budget games, they do this thing that really annoys me, and I understand why they do it, and I don't think we think about it that much anymore, where like they're alone in their adventure and they talk to themselves all the time.
Oh, yeah, like, Horizon is constant, yeah.
Yeah, no, a lot of games do it, where they're like, oh man, maybe like I should solve the puzzle this way. Like they're trying to give you hints.
The harvesting's always the worst. It's like, oh yeah, this plant's great.
Yeah.
Like, okay, thanks, Deacon. Like, calm down.
And it's just like when you get to kind of the more story-focused moments, you're like, I don't think this character would necessarily do this, or they're like enough of an expert in this thing that they wouldn't need to like say it to themselves out loud. And that's why Atreus is so good. Like he talks pretty constantly throughout your adventures, but they kind of position him in this interesting way where, yes, obviously, he is your son, he has a lot to learn, and so he's asking you questions that inform you as the player, but he also kind of comes from this different background where it's like, he knows languages that you don't, right?
Yeah.
Or he has a relationship with his mother that he doesn't have with you, and so you kind of get like, not only Kratos' side of the world, but his side of the world. And Kratos is not the type of character that would constantly talk to himself or quip to himself, but it makes sense that his son would be. And so it just like feels so much more natural and engaging having this person to bounce off of that never feels like they're in the way. They just are only contributing, which I think is really cool. And man, there's this amazing scene where I don't remember what he's upset about, but I think he's like Atreus is reflecting on his mom, and Kratos is behind him, and so Atreus can't see him, and Kratos like is about to reach out to like give him a hug or something, or just embrace him, and then he pulls back, and you're just like, oh God, that says so much. Like you've given me so much insight into their relationship through just a simple gesture. I love it. But yeah, it's one of those things I think when you get games that come out on different platforms, my mindset is always like, oh man, like I would love to play it, but I have so many things that I haven't played that I would like to get to. And I'm glad that wasn't the sentiment here. Like just revisiting God of War, I already had a ton of love for it. It won our Game of the Year, but I think 4 years on, it's still feeling so cutting edge and just so brilliantly designed. Is awesome. And I think like things that used to bother me about it don't bother me as much the second time around.
Yeah, that's interesting how that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Something just seems stupid or whatever, and then like you play a game long enough, it's like, yeah, whatever. Like it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I wonder if that comes from some sort of like when you're evaluating something at the time, because like I did the preview for God of War, and then obviously it came up a lot critically for Game of the Year and on Frame Trap and stuff like that. I wonder if that's like some innate desire to be like, no, I saw that flaw. I want to recognize it. I don't want to sweep it under the bus. And I wonder if like the benefit of hindsight can sort of give you that. Actually, this doesn't really matter. Like,
I was red hot on Red Dead Redemption 2 that year, and I brought all of that fire into GOTYs. And I can't remember, it was like 2 or 3 years later. I don't know if it was a trailer for the new one or just like a video I was watching or something like Sony re-released, and I was watching gameplay of that game for like 30 seconds and was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, probably should have won. Look at that. Because like you were saying, like somebody actually wrote into the showcase, the most recent community showcase, patreon.com/EZAGOTY.
Nice.
It was like, I'm playing God of War and I feel happy for Huber because he got me to play God of War, but like, it's okay. He's like, it's just not really. And I can't remember, it was like, where it's like, I don't know how to connect with you on that one, because every developer I think wants to make hitting someone with something feel as good as it does in that game. I don't know how they pulled that off. I don't know how the wizardry at which that just feels different, that axe, like it's so satisfying. that they clearly Thor and the Avengers just yoink, just like ripped that whole concept of like you throw it, you leave it, you call it.
Right.
It's so fundamental and so much
Well,
fun.
that's something I noticed, because one of the things I did over the break is I played Halo 5 right before I started Halo Infinite campaign.
Nice. That was a good decision.
And man, it's just like there's just something that they improved about the way those guns feel that I can't put my finger on it. But in Halo 5, I really wasn't having any guns that I particularly cared for. And in Halo Infinite, it's like, I like all these guns.
Yeah, that was a big
one
takeaway
situation
for me
or
from the
another.
campaign. Yeah. Except the Ravager, I don't
Sure.
really love it, but yeah.
I have friends from high school reaching out to me just totally independently via text. They're like, you playing Infinite? I'm like, yeah, you liking it? They're like, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Like, it's back, baby.
Yeah,
Feels
for
good.
sure.
Go Kratos.
Yeah, man, it's blowing me away all over again, and I love that feeling. And I kind of going back to what I was saying at the beginning. One, it makes me feel like time is flying by way too fast. That God of War 2018 is almost 4 years old. Like, what happened? I feel like I was just sitting in a garage with Corey talking about that game not that long ago. But like, just the tiniest little things, right? Where I feel like so many action games, you have like kind of your basic weapon, and you have your light attack, and then you have your light heavy combo, and it kind of all branches off from that. And it's like here, it's like, yes, you still have that stuff, but what if you had an axe where you could throw it, and then on the way back, it could also damage people, and you could time that where you could hit multiple people, and if you switch to your fists, you'll stun them. And then there are finishers, but the finishers change depending on like the type of enemy that you're fighting, and you can do different things there. Like just really tiny things that are like almost nothing on their own, but add up to making it feel like so singularly special in a really cool way. And maybe my mind will change once if I'm able to get later on again with this replay, but I've got some big reviews coming up. If my feelings on the gear will change, but I love how the gear like feels so secondary right now. Bloodworth. I know a lot about God of War. I don't know a lot about Chicory. I know almost nothing.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. And I'm sure a lot of people, like, even if they've seen like a clip of it in like a showcase or something, like, what is that game? So imagine if you took like Link's Awakening and you just made the whole game a coloring book. That's essentially what you've got. And so you play as this character that doesn't have a canon name. You name the character. And they inherit this magic brush from the previous wielder. And it's like this legacy of things it's passed down. And then, and all the color has vanished from the world, and so it's your job to A, go around and recolor parts of the world, and then B, sort of figure out what's going on, what's happening that's causing this. And it's got a lot of really cool things going for it. One thing I didn't even realize until like 3 nights in that it's like, oh yeah, this game doesn't have combat outside of boss fights.
Oh.
But it's just like the gameplay is so engaging.
Yeah.
What you're doing is so engaging anyway. So it doesn't even like, it's not even something that crosses your mind because you're just having a good time exploring and coloring things. And one thing that's nice is like you can color in things as little or as much as you want. So that you do need paint to kind of like an early example is like if you paint like certain flowers, they'll bloom, and so then you can use those flowers as platforms where they might like spit you up to a higher ground or something like that. And then some of the other like earlier power-ups that you get with the brush is it'll like glow in the dark, so you can light your way through caves, or you can kind of do this Splatoon thing where you like dive into the paint, so you can kind of go through narrow gaps and that kind of thing. And so the traversal and the exploration and the platforming feel really good. There's a lot of little gift boxes out there that have tons and tons of cosmetics, just hats and costumes and things that you put on. and it's real fun to play around with those. And then you can color your character to whatever color you want, and color your hats and your outfits what you want. But it's really nice because it's also limited. So every sort of region of the map, there's a 4-color palette. So you have your basic black and white, but then there's 4 colors that go in there. And then there's also these gift boxes of like brush styles, so you can actually change like the pattern of your brush. So you can have like horizontal lines, you can have like polka dots or whatever.
And does that actually matter in terms of the gameplay, or is it just?
It's just to like,
okay.
Give you more options for like how you want to paint and like what little details and things that you want to put into things. But yeah, you will need to, like somebody wants you to like paint their house, or you might need to like paint a tree to like, get a kitten out of it, and then the kitten goes to like orphanage, and there's like an art academy, and there's a few times where they will just essentially give you a prompt, or they'll give you a picture to copy, and you've got to go through and like on the canvas, with your PS5 controller or your mouse or whatever you're using, try to paint that picture. And so some of them would be like, okay, here's an example, here's a character, draw that character. And some of them would just be like, fear. And there's a blank canvas for you to draw fear.
Spider, easy, done.
Yeah.
Scary.
But most of those are optional. So that's what, again, it's kind of those interesting things to where, like my map, a lot of it is still very blank, but then I'll just come across a screen and, just start filling in color and, do this, and then I'll fill in this screen for whatever random reason. And one of the things I did like early on is I would like make sure that like I color in characters so that they stand out from the background, and
that makes sense.
Figure out what palettes I like for them. And then like at the same time, the dialogue is really, really good and like really introspective. And so it's like anyone that's an artist, I think, can relate to like a lot of these issues of like, feeling like you're not good enough for the responsibility you have, or you're trying to please your parents, or you're trying to please your elders, or, you're really looking up to this person, but you realize that like they've got a lot of flaws and hangups too.
Right.
And so like the characters just kind of go back and forth and process these things. And then there's like little decoration spots and stuff too. You unlock like a whole like sets of things to like, put things in little rooms, kind of like an Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer kind of thing.
This almost sounds like color therapy.
It is. It is like very, very chill. And one of the reasons, okay, so there's 2 main reasons I ended up getting into this game. Number one is, I'd heard other people.
I've heard this game brought up a lot.
Bringing this game up, but I hadn't heard any of the other allies bring it up. And so it's like, okay, like I was saying, like rather than like be like wheel 6 on some game that everybody else is already going to talk about, I want to check this out.
Good on you, blood.
Yeah.
And then number 2 is Lena Raine doing the music, who did the music for Celeste.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just like, and I do that sometimes, like, oh, that person's writing the music. This is going to be a good time. And it is. And, like, there are things early on that very, like, directly remind me of Celeste, but there's such a broader range. There's so many different things. And now this is where I'm probably going to end up repeating myself in Game of the Year discussions. But there's so many different things in there that like, oh, this reminds me of early Final Fantasy. It's like, oh, this reminds me of Crystal Chronicles. Oh, this reminds me of Paper Mario. And just all of these different environments and things. Really good about secrets. Really good about just, like if you like exploration and you're not like trying to just like press for time, like it's a really good, like you're saying, like a relaxing game.
Yeah.
And the coloring, that's the thing. It's like the coloring feels good mechanically, and it feels good to just let yourself loose creatively. And that's one of the things it's really been interesting to me, is like with those canvases, is like just sort of like just kind of like scratching off the rust, of not having drawn anything for a while. It's like, oh, now I have to draw this, and like, oh, this is actually, this is nice.
Yeah.
and then those conversations, like, oh yeah, I relate to what you guys are going through right now. This is reminding me of things in my life. Yeah.
I thought of Okami, and this was not
Yeah.
a huge issue with Okami, but in Okami you have to draw shapes, or you have to brushstroke in a certain way in order to like produce a desired effect for combat or exploration. And for the most part, it's very good, but you would run into instances where you're like, okay, it didn't think that I made the shape, but I did make the shape, and so like it just that little bit of frustration in terms of like software interpretation and your own intention. Does that ever happen with Chicory, where you're like, oh, I thought I colored it the way that you wanted me to, but I guess I didn't?
It actually doesn't really have anything like that. The boss fights are kind of interesting because there's nothing else in the game that's like it. You know, you're basically kind of, you know, you're trying to, you know, attack them with the brush, but you're also trying to like dodge, you know, almost like an MMO or something. You know, it's like you've got like, okay, this line's coming this way and I got to move out of the way, you know. And so that's a little bit more, you know, you have to have more reflexes and stuff for that. But through most of the game, that's sort of not really too much of an issue. You can kind of like hold down the button and it'll just sort of start filling out, just kind of spreading out through the whole, like whatever's like within those lines, right? And so sometimes that can get a little bit weird because any like other objects that are touching it will automatically like pop into that color. And so if you're trying to, you know, create a color scheme, then sometimes like, oh, I didn't want to fill that thing, and so like I could go back, or like there might be like tree trunks was a thing that like, oh, I want to like color that tree trunk, but like every time somehow I'm just not clicking the right spot. I'm trying to fill that in. But for the most part, like things like you don't really have to draw shapes and stuff so much.
Yeah. I think what you were saying with the tree trunk is kind of the point that I was trying to get to.
And even when they have the prompts, it's like it's very like non-judgmental in terms.
Good.
You know, it'll get in there and it'll really comment actually on like the colors that you picked, and you know, and brush styles and stuff that you picked in a way that feels natural, even though, you know, it's like, okay, this is just pulling from a database, but it feels like feedback.
Sure,
which is cool.
That is cool.
And there's a little side quest that's even tied to doing those as well with another character and stuff, issues that they're going through.
I loved when you were talking about like, oh, I want to color in the characters to make them stand out, and it's neat that like how you color the characters could be completely different than how I color the characters. Right. But since you're kind of making your mark on this world, right? That's one of the primary things that you're doing, if not the primary thing. Is there ever anything? Is there like a little monster or a villain or something that will like undo what you've done, and you'll like go back and be like, wait a minute, that's not how I left that?
Not to that extent, but there are times when you kind of have to sort of there'll be like little bugs that'll eat paint, or there'll be like just kind of like just sort of like darkness, and so you kind of have to do that timing of like, okay, I've got to like color this in really quick and then like move through to get there.
You mentioned like a side quest, and you mentioned how good the dialogue is. Is that really the reason why you would go out and seek these things out? Is just to kind of get as much of that flavor as possible, or are there things that you get like different cosmetics or? Yeah,
like I said, there's an incredible amount of costumes, and a lot of them are like, you know, really, you know, cool or cute or whatever, and it's nice to like get earmuffs when you go up on like a snowy mountain or that kind of thing. And yeah, so there's costumes, there's the brush styles, there's the decorations, and then there's music. There's also plants that you can like plant, you know, in like little gardens and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff you get either through side quests or you can see litter. There's just like trash. It's like, so if you pick up trash, there's some characters in the world that will take the trash from you and then give you a record player with, you know, 3 different songs. Yeah. So then like that's part of creating your space too, right? So it's like, oh, okay, there's this beach party. What record player am I going to put down, and which song from the game am I going to play at this beach party? So,
yeah, I feel like there is so much of the appeal of Animal Crossing in this game. where like it's just the how do I express myself that is the fun of it, which is really cool. You mentioned that they're not being combat really outside of the bosses. Are the bosses, this game is very introspective. Are the bosses kind of thematically relevant to what you're going through?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all very tightly tied into the story.
Nice.
And so it's all part of figuring out like what the heck is going on, and why is this happening?
Did you play through the whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How long was it?
It told me, I think when I finished, it told me I had put in like 23 hours.
Okay. That is much longer than I would suspect.
Yeah, it's longer than I was thinking too.
Yeah.
But it's weird because, again, it's like you can just get
You were
obsessed
just
with little
chilling out.
details.
Yeah.
If you want. There's a lot more that I could do. I could do a lot more drawings. Like there's a whole like art gallery with like lines and lines of portraits, and there's portraits around the world. There's like, if you go and do your art lessons, this is where it's going to end up.
Yeah.
One of the prompts that I was like actually happy was because I wasn't sure if I was going to pull it off. It's like an adorable creature. I was like, okay. And then by the end, it's like, I think I have an adorable creature.
Does it,
Honey, is this adorable?
like, because you said it didn't judge you or it would compliment on the decisions that you made. Does it guide you in terms of like style at all? Or offer any...
Not really. Like I said, sometimes there will be like you're making a color version of an old painting that was black and white, and so okay, it's like I'll try to do what you did here, but then like I said, like an adorable creature, it's like
Right, go for it.
Yeah,
Cool.
I don't know if you had just drawn stripes what it would tell you, but
Brandon, speaking of games that I don't know anything about.
Yay.
You said you were bringing this, and I just saw it at a glance on Steam,
Right.
and like that glance,
Yeah, I know.
made me think like, oh damn, this looks really cool. It seems like my kind of jam.
Yeah.
Which it's called Forgive Me, Father, and again, I don't know anything about it really, but at a glance, it kind of seemed like a like Lovecraftian FPS. Is that an accurate?
It's kind of that Dusk, early Quake kind
Okay.
of vibe that's like making a resurgence, but where you have a lot of like two-dimensional enemies. And that can either be super fun if you're like, going back and playing Doom and just like blowing up demons and stuff. And this, there's like a lot of zombies, there's a lot of tentacle monsters, there's a lot of like Innsmouth is a very strong current. If like anyone's a Lovecraft fan out there, it's like those people that turn into fish people.
It's so weird because like I could not call myself a Lovecraft fan. I haven't actually like sat down with the works of H.P. Lovecraft, but I've consumed so many things that
Right.
Lovecraft has
Right.
inspired that I feel like I have some connection and understanding of what it is. It's
I've
a
read
strange
enough
thing.
Lovecraft that it always cracks me up whenever I watch some horror movie and like somebody's like, "Have you ever heard?" And I'm like, "Of Lovecraft?" And they're like, "Of Lovecraft." I'm like, "Yes, I have." Where are we going with this?
Yeah.
Well, like a multiverse of madness, like that's
Right.
a lot of that's just kind of pseudo based on this idea of Hellboy, the idea of like the galaxy opening up and just tentacles coming through. What is that thing? I can barely see it. That's Lovecraft. Like, and so much of it is like I'm getting voices. Even like Poe did a lot of that with the Telltale Heart and the darkness speaks to me. What does it mean? And as a reader, like for a lot of people in the fiction in that era, a lot of it was like, you're crazy. And that's the way that people just kind of summed it up. They were like, I don't have to think about that. A lot of my, I'll give old horror to friends and they're like, well, did the nurse do it? And I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, did she do it? And I'm like, the point of it is that you don't know. Like you come out of these stories being like, I don't know, is that shark coming back at the end of Jaws? I don't know. And so a lot of the spookiness of it, which I wouldn't expect a very like hallway trap based, lots of staircases and platform type of shooter with like shotguns and pistols, would have like kind of a creepy story and like do a good job of like, kind of throwing very strange looking things at you. Play this with headphones on almost entirely. Played with a mouse and keyboard from my friend Ben Moore. I was tempted for a second to plug in that controller, and then I'm like, this just doesn't feel like that type of a game.
It definitely looks like a mouse and keyboard game.
And I'm getting headshots. And one thing that's fun about this game is it's very grotesque. And again, the enemies are two-dimensional, and it's kind of like if Dusk and like 13 had a baby, and like 13, the new one they just did a horrible remaster of, and then that turned into some Lovecraftian monster. That's kind of this game. But it's very gross. It's very loud. The music is very heavy and scary and intense. The animation can be kind of silly. One of the first enemies you come up against is a zombie. And if you headshot them, you blow their head off. And they're holding a zombie head, and they put that head on their head, and you have to headshot them again to take them out.
That's
But
really good.
Stuff
Yeah.
doesn't have a lot of health. It's more you have to know where these things are. So if you hear a growl Resident Evil style, it's oh, that thing's behind me. But everything is just kind of 2 or 3 frames of animation coming at you pretty quick, and it's just a bunch of hallways. But I was just cackling, just running through this thing because it's so over the top, but not in a way that's grounded enough in horror that they can be silly, but it's there's a lot of opening doors and something just rushes you, and you have to switch to my shotgun real fast.
Yeah.
Which I don't use too much because I'm trying to save ammo, et cetera, et cetera.
I am just curious because it's interesting where I feel like a bunch of people completely separate were man, what if we brought Quake back? Or the style of Quake. And then it all kind of happened very quickly. And so I'm curious, how much it is inspired by your Quake or Doom. Are you finding different colored keys? Or is there a wireframe map?
I'm definitely finding keys. It's pretty straightforward. It's once I go into an area, a key is going to get me out of here. I don't have to be the chartreuse key. I got to go back to that chartreuse door. It's no, keep moving. The game's more interested in kind of spooking you and throwing things at you and setting up real clear barriers between you've killed everything. Silence. That silence will end soon. Have fun, and it's all right, is that silence at the end of this platform when I get up here or this door that I'm going to open? It really loves to be oh, you walked down that part of the hallway. Now 50 of these things are rushing you. One thing that's really interesting, having played Doom a bunch, is when I finally got the shotgun, I was oh, sweet, I can do crowd control that much more. And not really, it's still maybe the person next to that person in front of you would take damage, but it's really just going to obliterate one target. But they love throwing, 20, 30 of these things at you. Kind of comedic, the light changes and laughter, it definitely has a funhouse vibe to it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of tricky for me. I'm maybe I just don't play these games enough where it's just ooh, it's tough to juggle 20 of these in a very small space. It's kind of like Left 4 Dead, where it's once one of those guys grabs you and you slow down just a little bit, you're I'm stuck. And I just don't play these games that much. I did not play Quake at the time. I played Doom on the Sega 32X or something. I don't
think I've played the 32X
all the great PC shooters I came at from the wrong console, the wrong direction, 10 years late. I did not grow up getting good at that type of stuff. Which is why I wanted to play with mouse and keyboard. It just felt more these 2-dimensional things. Again, that funhouse vibe. It just felt more I really want to be precise. Shoot him in the legs, see what happens.
You just brought up the shotgun, and it made me just reflect on the shotgun and old Doom games. Where it's not about crowd control. It's about stopping power, and you can use the shotgun as a sniper rifle in those games. Where things can be so far away.
And there's a lot of hallways. So as long as I can get out of this room and know where my exits are, I can go down this super long hallway, and then this big train of things comes in, and then what do I got? 36 shells left. And that's also fun. It's a little, my tactics here aren't genius, but it's still pulse pounding. The music's intense, and it was fun. I was surprised. Middle of the day, I'm playing this game, and I'm just whoa, this is my blood temperature's rising just a little bit because it came out. I think it's an early access. I wouldn't say it's not rough around the edges. It moves very smoothly, and the whole pace of the game, and it ran really well. I played it on Steam. But it's definitely the more of this game is coming. It's kind of their first foray. And we were talking about this genre making a resurgence. There are names. It's one of those genres where I see a blah 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 game, a Tony Fox game or whatever, and it's I should know who that is, but I don't. And so I wonder. I don't know if this is the team's first effort. There was a Fallen Aces joke right in the tutorial, just aces on a table, Fallen Aces. And I'm okay. Maybe I don't know if it's the same team or if they know each other. So it's and Fallen Aces, I played the demo as well and can't wait to play the full thing. It's just so retro and yet so tough and just beautiful to watch. Just these things. I go down a hallway and this thing, would come down and I'm just kind of staring at it. I know I can headshot this thing when it gets close. I'm just gonna watch this. Here I am in 2022 and this is 10 frames of animation, but I'm digging it. Like,
Yeah.
it's spooky.
How much does it lean into the story?
As much as you want, it literally will say story. There'll be like a point on the wall. It's like story.
Okay.
And then you go up, just it tags it, and then like it's a whole smattering of stuff. So it'll be like a letter, a photo, a map, and you can, some of that stuff I recognize, like, oh yeah, that's part of the story I'm not interested in, and the other parts I'm like, oh yeah, Madam, what's her name? That's right. What did she? Oh, she died. Okay. But if you don't, if you're playing it through a second time, there's no cutscenes to slow you down or anything. It opens up. Like Doom. Was it Doom 1 or Doom 2? Where you're on the table where you just get them. Huh? I got a gun. Like I think you are a. I don't learn a lot about you, at least from what I've played so far.
Wait,
but like you're a.
What are you talking about? With
Doom, you just wake up on a table, right? Is it?
Oh,
is
in
that the second-
2016.
Is that 2016 that you
where
were
you
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
where you like just. Yeah.
start punching everything?
Where he's basically like, fuck the story. Yes. Yeah.
But you start in a room that's actually very Inscription-ish. I was
Oh.
like, this kind of makes me feel like that cabin. So you can explore and like every now and then you'll turn a corner and like, oh, okay, if I want to stop right here, I can read this. I just imagined Hubert like reading all of it. Or you can just, second time I played it, I already read all these things. I'm just going to keep on trucking. And I think that fits because it is tough just in it's not took me a while to get any sort of like assault type thing. Like it was
Yeah.
just very single target, every click counts. Not a ton, like ammo didn't really run out, but like when I found it, I'd be really happy. When I got health, I was like, oh, thank you. So it wasn't like survival horror, but like compared to like Painkiller and games I've like kind of played in this vein, it's like those games, I just feel like I'm constantly shooting something. It's
Yeah.
like, even if I'm looking at an environment, I'm like, something's running at me, right? Oh, yep, look at that thing over there. It's trying to make its way over to where I am. And there were definitely moments of solitude, moments of like kind of Alan Wake-ish, Silent Hill, like,
Cool.
oh, let me breathe in the environment. And then, another corridor.
You mentioned it was early access. I saw that it was $14.99. Pretty cheap price. But I guess my concern with it being early access, even at the low price point, is like the natural question is how much is in it? Like, is it one act and there's meant to be three, or how does it do it?
It just seems like one of those games that's so settled into its budget that like I'm not concerned. It seems like they're really, because sometimes you have something like Forest that's in early access for a really long time, something horror based that's like so high on premise that you play it and you're like, I really got to get into this full thing before you show me what's going on here. And I remember like what I should invest in or what's really going to work in this game. And I remember playing GoldenEye on the N64, and I'm like, I just want more levels. Like, I don't care. I like this game. And this seems kind of like, what was the game similar to this that was like more gothic, that was kind of like Nightmare Creatures, where we were like in an alleyway and we were all obsessed with it. Lighting was a big thing. It was Thief-esque, where there's lots of stealth.
Oh, yes.
That wasn't very
I want to say
long.
Gloomhaven.
Yeah,
Is
something
that
like
it?
that.
Oh, right. There's
Gloomhaven's a card
Gloomhaven,
game, I think.
and there's Gloomwood.
Yeah, oh boy.
One
But
or the
like
other.
that
It's
wasn't
gloomy.
super long, but you kind of know that full game
I
is going to
believe it is
deliver just
Gloomwood, yeah.
that. It's like sells itself enough on its premise. And I don't know if you remember this, Blood, when I sent you the request. I got this game a while ago. I think I got this before Christmas, got the code, and then played a little bit before Christmas and played a little bit just to refresh myself before Frame Trap. And if you are confused at all, if you're like, forgive me, Father, that's really interesting. Like, let me just check that out. 10 seconds of this game is all you need to see to whether like, oh, that looks
Yeah.
interesting, or right now. And it's like I just messaged you, and I was like, put that on my, because just on a list, Lovecraft, shooter, like all these things, murder mystery, the time period and who you play as, and then I just saw the aesthetic and was like, oh yeah. Same with the Fallen Aces, like please. Fun to look at. Really, really interesting art style, and again, played on Steam and just ran beautifully.
Yeah. I always love that when you are getting a new game on PC and you're like, okay, this is trying to be old. I don't have to worry about it running.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to run like a dream.
Or
It's
really
great.
like kind of like, Horizon 2 is coming out soon. Like we got to Forza Horizon 5. I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
Whenever something even buckles for half a second in Forza Horizon 5, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
Or it's like some of these games you don't,
Yeah.
quibble about that stuff because it's the bar is just in a completely different
You
direction.
ever jump so high in Forza Horizon 5 that the map kind of loads out? It's like there's just a hole in the ground over there.
Not as many times as you have, Blood, but yeah, maybe.
It is time for the sizzle, and I think this is a hot one, or at least I want you guys to treat it like that. Like, really don't pull any punches.
Okay.
Treat it like a hot one.
With this, the question that I bring to you, the thing that I'm doing to make it hot is, what game do you think will be the most snubbed at EZA Game of the Year this year? Of course, this is all in good fun,
Oh,
right?
I mean, well, I can tell you what game I'm not going to be able to play before GOTY's. The Broken Head. Did you listen to Cap this morning? I mentioned it in Cap. I was like, oh, no.
Not the whole thing. I don't know what.
Life is Strange. I'm just like,
sure.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like...
I feel
There's
that
so many other things. I think Returnal probably beat Life is Strange. I think the last 2 hours of Guardians, because I'm just loving so much, but I know I'm not going to finish, but I just can't. It's just my guilty pleasure. Guardians is so great.
Yeah.
And such a, it's so much fun to go through. And I just think about the hours I put into Guardians. It's like, I probably could have put 2 or 3 of those hours into Life is Strange, but there's just too many games.
Yeah. Guardians is one that, when this is all done, I want to go back to and finish for sure. Really enjoyed that.
It's weird. I'm not finished with Guardians yet because like I really like it. I'm enjoying my time with it, but it's one of those weird games where it's like, yes, I really like this. I don't think it is in any way GOTY, you know.
Sure.
Like it's a weird category to be in.
It is. It's just the way that we have structured our GOTYs, and I like this. I like our GOTYs.
Yeah.
If, just in case you're curious. We have a lot of fun categories that really honor a lot of things you don't necessarily think of.
Yeah.
And the last couple GOTYs in particular, I was like, those snuck up on me. I'm not going to have a best character. I'm like, I think it was like 2 years ago. I had no purchase on anybody. I was like, I don't know any of these people. And so I was like, I really want it. That's why I wanted to play Life is Strange, to be ready for that. Yeah. We all know it's Echoes of the Eye. We all know it's the Outer Wilds DLC. Right. That none of us are going to finish nor understand. Well, and Isle is going to be in the back there with a box of tissues.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think it could be.
Shout out to Isle.
Because personally, it's one that I know I'm not going to end up playing before we talk. But then the reaction from the allies, Deathloop. The reaction from the other allies is like,
I
nah.
called it.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I
was making a joke. But yeah, you're right.
Like, and it's so funny because I feel like that's the way the awards are this year. It's like one outlet will be really behind something, and others just like, what? Like, what are you talking about right now?
I wrote Deathloop out before the holidays.
That's why I think
before we went into Game Awards.
Kind of funny, just gave Ratchet and Clank the Game of the Year, and I'm like,
wow,
I like that game.
That I've played enough of.
I don't see that yet getting anywhere close to our Game of the Year.
Yeah.
But that was 2021. I think 2021, the way I can sum it up best is, did you play that game? Yeah. How was it? Fantastic. Really?
Yeah.
Really, really good. Really, really great. Loved every minute of it. Totally fantastic. Got my $60. Made me really happy. I feel like I'm a better person because I played it. Cool. GOTY material? Hell no.
Yep.
It's every game. It's like...
The way you exactly described it is how I feel about Deathloop. Because every time I talk about it, I feel like I'm trashing it. And it's like, no, I like this game a lot. It's just definitely for sure not GOTY.
I say something about Avengers. People are like, so you don't like that? I'm like, I have maxed every character but Black Panther. Like,
well, that's the funny thing too, because I think
with Forza, it's like Forza Horizon 5 isn't GOTY.
Talk like I'm talking down on Forza.
8 million. It's like,
I think I might be around 80 or 90 on Forza now.
It's fun.
They really got me with the weeklies with the winter season. With
is that what got you?
And stuff. Yeah, because they just kept giving me checklists and like I just keep going back to the game.
Yep.
And so like after that series, like those 4 weeks were done. Like okay, now I'm moving on.
Sometimes I don't think you don't understand my open world addiction, but then a game like this comes along and I get it. Those checklists.
The Outer Wilds DLC punches me in the soul because when we talked about Outer Wilds, I hadn't finished it. I still haven't finished it, but I played enough of it to be like, okay, I see why this is special.
Yeah.
Like I get it, and I was definitely like on its side. I haven't even touched the Outer Wilds DLC.
Right. I've got no idea what's going on there.
Yeah. So that one hurts for sure.
I might dabble in it. I might get a chance to dabble in it, but that's gonna be about as much as it gets.
Life is Strange: True Colors, I definitely think is correct in terms of like I'm not going to play that before GOTY either, and if Huber really fights for it, which I could see happening because he loves Life is Strange, it's just like I'll have to take your word for it. One for me coming from the kind of the opposite side of that is Guilty Gear Strive.
Oh yeah,
where it's just like I don't think anyone else understands why this game meant so much to me in 2021 and why I think it's so good.
We're hitting such a cozy
I think Guilty
stride of
Gear's
the
in one
gen.
of those levels that I could see it just from the little bit that we played, and seeing you play it. I could totally get the merits of it, even if I haven't invested all that much time myself.
Yeah, I think it's just, and maybe this is unfair. Maybe this isn't true, and the other allies will respond differently than this. But I think it's just kind of like if you play a really great hardcore racing game, the other allies just don't have that. It's not that they don't respect it or can't understand why it's good. It just doesn't even like bubble up in their brain when they're thinking about contenders. It's just like I just don't expect a fighting game to bubble up in anyone else's brain other than my own, which is not a problem. It's just the way the cards are dealt with this stuff.
That's why goaties are tough. It's 8 hours of brain bubbling.
Yeah,
Right.
it is. Yeah, and like what's so. I think I would be so much more satisfied with goaties if I didn't get done every single goatee and being like, "Damn, I wish I would have talked about that more."
And that's
like
yeah,
every
that's,
time. Yeah.
That's goaties.
Okay, so mine is Guilty Gear. What did you say yours was?
Deathloop, the game that I have not played,
Yeah.
and the allies seem not down on, but not as high as other people. Yeah.
Right.
You gotta manage those goatee hours. And mine's Life is Strange, True Colors for sure.
Those are good picks. Those are good picks. All right. This Sizzle is brought to you by some wonderful shout out to your patrons. We shout you out on all of our various podcasts. We have quite a few. For this one, gentlemen, I thought, in honor of God of War, give me your best Kratos shout out.
Yeah.
Shout out to Elthanas, Greg the Dark Knight Kettering, Caleb Togi Crawford, and Nick. Shout out, boy. Yeah, the boy is key. Ooh, okay. I am really excited to talk about this because I've been putting some time into it again, and that is Returnal.
Oh yeah. Started that the other day. Yeah.
Yeah, Returnal. I feel like everybody always has this game at Game of the Year as well, where like you played it when it came out, and it came out like early-ish. And then you come back to it, and you're like, "Oh yeah, this thing." That's definitely been Returnal for me. I have a lot to say, but I've already talked about Returnal on Frame Trap, and so Blood, I know you've been playing, and then Brandon, have you dug into it at all?
Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of want
Just a touch.
I don't think you guys have talked about it on Frame Trap, so I'm kind of curious where you're at with the game, how it's been progressing, and kind of your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's sort of not. Spoiler, not spoiler. I've passed Act 1.
Oh.
So if
Wait a minute.
If you've played the game, when the trophy pops up and tells you Act 1. But I don't want to spoil what that is for people that play it for the first time. But
wait a minute. Hold on. I want to know. Okay, because I all right. Potential spoilers. Skip ahead if you don't want to hear this. This is your warning right now. So when you say Act 1, do you mean the first boss, or do you mean is it a different thing?
No, not the first boss.
Okay.
No. Yeah, I've been through. I've gotten access to 3 biomes and then some.
Okay, because last night? Yeah, last night I got to the final health bar of the 3rd biome boss and then died.
Oh no!
And was super salty.
Oh no!
So I don't think I've experienced what you're talking about yet.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I definitely have not.
Interesting, because I thought you had played more of it before that.
Yeah. No, I have picked at it before. I started over again.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't continue from where I was, but yeah, I was at the third biome, last health bar, and I'm gonna play it tonight. So maybe I'll understand what you're talking about.
Third biome
But so
dies
that kind of gets
tonight.
into what I was saying. Like, this game is weird in that it's like it can be like really hard and brutal until it's not.
Yes, Brandon. I said that there was something that
Right.
I wanted to say, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. It's not that it's not. I still think it's hard, like just straight up. I think it is,
Right.
is a challenging game, at least in comparison to most games. But it's not like, I think when you first start playing it, it feels like a brick wall in a way that it eventually reveals itself not to be.
Right. Yeah. So what I mean is, it's sort of like sometimes you just sort of and this is true of like a lot of roguelike stories. Like sometimes you just get like this combination of factors
Right.
that sort of works out in your favor towards like, I'm just in sync with what the game is doing right now,
Right.
and I'm just going off what feels like forever.
Right.
And so that's kind of what happened with Returnal. Is like I had one really good run where I got through a boss and I got pretty deep into this second area, and I got to the second boss, and then the second boss just knocked me out. And then it was like, I cannot get to this second boss.
Yeah.
Like there's a shortcut to go straight to that area, but like anything I was trying was like, I'm not getting back to this boss. And then I was like, okay, well I'm gonna try to like think about this. I'm gonna prepare a little bit. There's item that kind of acts as like a 1-up. So they're like, okay, when you die, you just sort of your health refills. And so okay, I'll make sure I get one of those, and then make sure I have that so that when I face this boss again, then I'll be good to go. And what was funny is I got through that boss, not even using the 1-up, and I got through the whole next area and through the next boss without even using the 1-up. It's just like, well, cool.
It's so interesting because I think Island Huber really struggled with the second boss. And I have not.
Oh yeah, I thought it was tough. Yeah.
I have not died to the second boss yet. Like when I've fought it twice, and both times I got through it. But then in the third biome, like I'll get far in the third biome and then I'll just die. Like the third biome has been a sticking point for me, and so I was so happy when I finally got to the boss. I don't think I would have been as salty if I died like immediately.
Yeah.
But then getting so
hope.
close, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what was weird
rough.
about that third biome, because it was just like a one and done for me. It's like, oh,
Wow.
there we go.
Oh man, no, I've been there, and I don't even know how many times, but a number of times, yeah. And it's weird because there's so much to dig into. Where do I even begin? I have a question for you that is not a host question, but you mentioned the item that gives you that resurrects you. There's also a parasite that will be like, if you die, I will detach and you'll survive a killing blow.
Okay.
And so I haven't been able to test it, but I don't know, does the parasite and the item that revive you stack?
Right. And also, like, surviving a killing blow, does that refill your health? Or does
No.
that just...
So that's the other interesting thing about it, because I think with the astronaut item, I don't think you get all your health back, but you get some health back, right?
Okay. I felt like you get all of it back, but
You might. I don't remember.
I mean, at least you get a pretty significant amount.
Yeah, I thought it was like a significant amount. I didn't think it was all, but I could be wrong. But when you lose the parasite, you have like just a tiny sliver of health.
Right.
So.
Sure.
But it's like, if you can have both of those things and they'll both work, having a couple of extra lives would be really. I'm strategizing.
Sounds like
Right.
wishful thinking.
Well, and now I'm like, okay, I know I can beat this boss, but if I can have those extra life items, and if I can come in with healing items, because healing items are so good, I think I can tank this enough to beat it. I was thinking about that in the shower today.
But what was funny to me though, like one of the things with this game, and I've now that I've put more time into it, I'm definitely warming more up, because I'm like, where the crap is this story going? Holy crap!
Yeah.
But for a while, it took a while for me to like really get a sense of direction. It just felt so aimless, because like, again, it's like, it's not a world that you explore. It's just like all the random rooms, and like, okay, these are side quest rooms and this is main path rooms. And it took me a while to like really clue in, and like, oh, okay, if I go here, then this will get me to the boss quicker. Or if I go here, and just trying to like sort that out and like just kind of learn the language of how this game is built.
Yeah.
It definitely made me feel kind of odd and directionless for a while. And it's weird because I like it, but there's a part of me that's like really, really like, it's making me appreciate Hades so much more.
Interesting.
Because I feel like it's so much more fun to like connect to different builds and effects and things in Hades and like all the different powers that you get from the different gods and all of that, and so many different directions that you can kind of go in that and have fun on a run with Hades. Whereas in Returnal, it's sort of like preparing for the objective. Like a lot of those things just don't, like you're talking about, like the parasites.
Mm-hmm.
Like the give and take of the parasites just isn't that interesting to me. Like the guns aren't like, I'm just gonna go for a gun that shoots fast, and I'm not too worried about a lot of the other augments. Like I've seen like one augment that I'm like, oh okay, I like that, but I'm not like do or die on it.
Yeah.
But in Hades, like I could pick up any weapon and like, okay, this is weird, but I kind of like it. Whereas in Returnal, like I don't want the pistol.
Yeah.
I usually don't want the shotgun. Like it doesn't do a whole lot for me.
So I agree and disagree. And so the points that I agree with you on, I think the weapon selection is maybe my absolute biggest criticism with Returnal, where it's not that I think there is only one good gun. There are multiple guns that I feel like I can be somewhat effective on, but I always come back to the carbine every single time. Like it is when I have a good carbine, I feel like maybe it's not necessarily the best in all areas, but it's so well rounded that it's like I'm going to choose this every time if I can. And I hate that, because going back to what you were saying with Hades, there might be weapons that I would gravitate to in Hades, but I felt like you could use all of them, and I felt that variance a little bit more. And then
just like how valuable the stackable effects were, and like just how they change combat. Yeah.
Right. Whereas here, I just, it's sort of like, is this the type of gun that I want? Whatever bonuses it has, like whatever. Like it just doesn't, like it's not that they don't help, but it's not really a decision that you're making. Like it's just part of the package.
Right. Like the alt fire is like, oh, I like the specific type of alt fire.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to pick up a shotgun for it.
Right, exactly. And I do think that's a problem. I also agree on the parasites. I like the parasites as an idea, but I feel like the way that I am thinking about them is way too binary, where it's like because what parasites are, for those who don't know, are these little creatures that you can pick up that attach to you, and it will give you something good and something bad. The problem is, I find that it always falls into like one of two categories, where the bad part just does not matter. Like the good part is really, really good, and the bad part is like, well, I don't care. That means nothing.
Coins
worthless.
disappear 1 second slower. Or something.
Yes, exactly. You're like, that just doesn't matter. Like, not in a huge way, or like the bad part is so bad and the good part isn't good enough that you're like, yeah, I'm never going to pick that up. Like, why would I ever do that?
The one I hate is the acid pools.
Oh, that one I don't mind.
Oh, you don't mind that?
No.
Well, some people like to punish themselves, right? It's like a pseudo hard mode,
Sure.
Like, it's just like, yes.
But
maybe I'm just not
side,
at that point
make
with
every
Returnal.
step
Like
kill me.
the idea of making it harder.
I
never get to
appreciate the
that point.
malfunctions a lot more.
Yes. So that was going to be my counter. Is I think malfunctions kind of accomplish what I want parasites to accomplish, where you can get a positive effect, but there's a chance that you will get something bad. And the things that can happen to you can be crippling. Like, you could be awful. Or you can spend this resource that carries over between runs called ether to cleanse the things. And there have been times where I'm like, I want this, I'm going to cleanse it, and then wish I would have had that ether, in the next biome. And so that has definitely come into play.
But you know what really, really works with the runs that I've like felt very in sync with, is sometimes there's an artifact that will increase your health every time you either gain a malfunction or cleanse a malfunction. So then you're just looking to get malfunctions. Cause it's just like, oh, my health's bigger. Oh, my health's bigger. Oh, my health's bigger. It's like, because that's so valuable.
Yeah.
And you get the little cores. That's another thing it's been interesting to me, is like some runs, like I'll get cores just be throwing them at me like candy, and others like I just don't see them.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how they kind of spread them out like that in different varieties.
I remember Hades being like that. I remember some runs of Hades, I was like, this is exactly what I want. Like, please what button can I hit to just get this whole setup?
But the other thing of malfunctions is you all can clear them by doing like challenges, and so I think that sort of plays in it as well. Some of the challenges are like open containers. So it's okay, that's strange, but okay, whatever. But others sometimes it's like, oh man, I've got to get melee kills, and this is a tough area to do that in. 'Cause there's a lot of flying.
Yeah, they have like that consumable where it's like you restore health with melee kills, and then you're like, well, nothing I'm fighting like really lends itself to a melee kill. Yeah, it's really annoying. But to kind of go back to the Hades comparison, I think why the like, oh man, it makes me appreciate Hades some more doesn't quite register with me in the same way. Oh, not that Hades isn't brilliant, it is, but I feel like Returnal has kind of this raw dexterity element to it, where like in Hades, sometimes I would be frustrated by like just not getting a good god for this one particular thing, or just like having the build not synergize. And although I wish there was kind of more variety in Returnal, at the same time, I feel like I can just kind of go, and the thing that is primarily propelling me forward is how well I shoot and how well I dodge, right? There's kind of this nice simplicity to it that I think is a benefit of not being so build dependent, which is really, really nice. And something that Huber said that he was really frustrated about is he was like, I feel like this game doesn't really throw you a bone in terms of run to run, where when you lose, you really are not carrying that much over. And I thought about it, and that's not really true, because once you kind of get through the biomes, you can get back to where you were, like almost immediately, because you have new equipment or a new pathway has opened up. And it's like you can kind of clear out the previous biomes again if you want to, but you can also get back pretty quickly. And so there does feel like there's this sense of progression, at least on some level.
Yeah, for sure. And I think once you clear that boss in that Act 1, like that's when like the story takes a turn, and like, oh, how, what, hello?
That's so interesting, because the way that the story was kind of setting itself up, I thought that I was close to the end, and I was hoping like, oh, I'll like wrap this up before Game of the Year. Like,
yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, I might have spoiled that for you, but
no.
Yeah, because I've always had the same thing. It's like, this is the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because it feels that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not even close, huh?
Yeah, I'm barely past that point.
Okay.
I don't know how much
I
further
didn't
is
think I
to
was
go.
Close, yeah.
Damn. Okay. Brandon, you really haven't gotten a chance to chime in, but what have been your thoughts on Returnal?
I dig what you were saying. Yeah, I'm not. I am. It doesn't really have anything to do with the strategy, particularly in this one game. But like, I'm such a sucker for the weapons that I love, and so like, I don't. Looking ahead at like the stuff I've gotten so far, I don't see myself really. Oh, let me try this. It's like, oh, no, this game is tough. I'm really cozy with this one type of weapon. The one thing I think is interesting in terms of difficulty. In all of the, I love getting outclassed for GOTY games. It's my favorite thing in the world. I'm like, okay, hey, have you played this one that you can't finish? I'm like, cool. I'm sure. Like, can't wait to offer my opinion. The difficulty reminds me actually a lot more of like Guitar Hero, because it's like you were saying, where you'll come back to something, or something suddenly won't be as hard, or you'll be able to breeze past something, or you get different tools to finish it. And with Guitar Hero, and I remember Rock Band, I would finish some tracks and be like, I'm not quite sure what I did better there. Like, I don't know if it was me being more focused on the combat, because I think I can get kind of outclassed in Returnal by being like, all right, I know how I need to strategize. I know what I'm bad at. And I get so focused on it that something else is in my periphery and like takes me out. Whereas if I just get comfortable, like I'll get past a challenge that wasn't that tricky before. So it's just, it's like skill versus comfort. And it's interesting because it just can be a very hairy game. There's just a lot of things to dodge, a lot of stuff going on.
It's interesting because the times where Returnal feels the most difficult to me is when when you just don't know what an enemy is going to do.
Right.
Like I think like in the first biome, you have like kind of those like flying stingray looking enemies, and it's like, okay, you learn very quickly, like, don't let them charge at you. Like, they will zip at you and they can track you pretty well. And so before you have that information, you kind of have this point where you're like, oh God, what does this do? Or like, how does this turret fire in this way? And I think that's the interesting thing about Returnal is it can, when you don't have that information, you're like, oh no, this game is going to be like such a ball breaker. But it's as soon as you figure out how to dismantle everything, you're like, okay, this actually is not that bad. But when you go into a new biome, I feel like you have to climb that mountain kind of all over again.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. And Brandon, I'm curious, has the way the game fires, right, where you half press it down to normal shoot and then full press it down for like your all fire, has that been an issue for you at all?
No, again, because I haven't been like cycling through the arsenal that much. So like I just got pretty cozy. It's not. I generally gravitate more toward action games that have more of a variety in terms of like, projectile to melee stuff. And like we were saying, melee is not like a huge component of this. And so I wouldn't necessarily say it's repetitive because I also said like I played a lot of Guardians and that combat is very repetitive. But I'm just, I'm settling in. Kind of like Hades 2. It's like I settled into one weapon because I'm like, this is not a game I'm going to get good at very quick. And so let me just get cozy with one thing and then I can, I won't be able to join that part of the GOTY discussion where everybody talks about all their favorite. Well, I tried this weapon for an hour and this weapon for an hour. That won't be me.
I really love the house blood. Mm-hmm. It's in the first biome and you go into it and the storytelling in this game, I feel like I had a very similar opinion of the storytelling as I did the gameplay, where playing it initially, I'm like, I have no idea what is going on. Like, I'm translating this alien language. I'm reading these tablets. I'm seeing kind of like these holograms. I go into this house. Like, what is going on? It felt like opaque to a frustrating degree. But what I love is the more that I spend time with it, and you can obviously speak to this more because you've seen more of the story, but I've gotten to this point where I'm like, I think I have an idea what's going on, and I could be completely wrong, but I love that I feel like there is room for interpretation, there's room for guessing.
Yeah.
Just through familiarity.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much that's going to hold up as we get further into it.
Sure.
But it definitely in the early stages, just there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
You go through ship's logs and then you find this note and like, ooh, that feels out of place.
Yeah. Well, I think the game.
That's like a breadcrumb. Like there's more here than it seems. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the game uses the structure of repeating so well in terms of the storytelling, because like there are audio logs that you pick up from different versions of yourself, like different runs that Celine has been on, and you'll listen to several of these audio logs and she'll sound like as you know her, but then you'll get an audio log and she sounds batshit insane, right? Like she just is taking on a completely different tone, and you're like, wait a minute, what is going on? And it's kind of the repetition is kind of playing with your perception of things, and then you go into the house and it's like, oh, like I can go into a new room in the house, and this is introducing me into a whole different aspect of, well, maybe not an entirely different aspect of her life, but I just, again, feel like it's playing with your perceptions all over again.
Yeah.
It's fun playing Returnal after having just played Mass Effect for the first time, because that also I've had a female protagonist during my run through of Mass Effect, and that deals a lot with understanding alien language and cycles and repetition and, how big is the world? How big can something that you can communicate with be? How much power can it have?
Yeah.
How long can it live?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Sci-fi's fun.
Yes, it is fun. I do think like I'm just kind of a sucker for sci-fi, so I think that is part of what the appeal is. But as I was playing last night, I sort of had this feeling, Blood, where I'm like, I'm kind of getting sick of seeing these 3 areas.
Right.
And maybe once I get through this boss, that will alleviate itself. But that was almost immediately counterbalanced by like, I love how much fun I'm having shooting things at all times. Like even the most basic enemy, I feel like there's a really good sense of just feedback. I think a lot of that comes through the controller. I think Returnal is a great example of what the DualSense can do well. But like, I'll die in Returnal, and then I'll have that moment of frustration, right, where I'm like, I should probably wrap it up, and then it's like, oh no, like let's just run around a little bit, and then before I know it, like I'm committing to another run,
Right.
You know, and I think that is such a good sign of like strong fundamental gameplay.
What's crazy to me, and I mentioned this the other day, is just the idea that they had to patch in the suspend mode.
Yeah,
Because a run can go so long. And
Yeah.
it's just like, just coming to this game now and you know, and trying to play it in that mindset of like, I might not have been able to pause here
yeah,
and go get groceries or go get dinner or whatever. It's just like, I don't understand why this was not a feature from the start. Because yeah, a run can go for a very long time. It's not like you just get to the end of the game in an hour.
It's one of those things where you're like, how did no one like fight for this? Like, it just seems so obvious. Like, I just don't understand how you can come up with like this super elaborate storyline, this entire world, right? These intricate gameplay mechanics, and you're not like, maybe they're gonna turn this off in the middle of a run, you know? Like, I just don't know.
I remember all the
this comes
complaints
out.
happening about Demon Souls from like Sony at the time. They were just like, people gonna like this? And it's like, we think so. It's like,
Yeah.
there's like, this is pretty brutal. But yeah.
Blood.
How brutal is too brutal?
It's definitely Returnal is definitely a game that I feel pretty hot on, and I think in returning to it, I've had an increased appreciation for it. Is this one that you think stands toe to toe with some of the best games of the year?
Personally, no. At least not where I've been, and and it's hard because it's like, well, I don't know how much more they do story wise, but like I was saying, just like even compared to something like Hades, which I know is not this year, like I just feel like, man, that game did this stuff a lot better. Even though I appreciate what Returnal's doing, like just even the fact that Housemarque took their strengths and they're like, okay, people aren't playing these kind of games anymore. Let's take the stuff we know and put it into a whole different context and make something that works and will be interesting again. And so I really appreciate that in terms of like the sort of bullet hell style shooting that you don't really get out of a lot of games nowadays. But yeah, I don't know. It's like I enjoy it, and I'm gonna keep picking my way at it. Probably after we have our debates and everything. But it's not really like grabbing me on that like upper echelon of stuff that I've played this year.
Gotcha.
When we talked, like when we talked about like Ratchet and Clank earlier, it's like I feel like it's kind of comparable in that way. It's like, this is really good. Yeah, I might even put Ratchet and Clank a little higher than it, honestly.
Man, that's so interesting because I feel like I have kind of the inverse reaction where I have not finished Ratchet and Clank yet, and I was really enjoying it. I have a lot of great things to say about it, but when it comes to Game of the Year, like not being done with Ratchet and Clank isn't going to eat away at me.
But that's
Whereas,
what I mean. It's like I feel like that about Ratchet and Clank, and I also feel that way about Returnal.
Well, that's the biggest game that I'm gonna like it, and based on what you're saying, it sounds like I'm not gonna be able to finish it by GOTY. But if I'm not able to finish Returnal by Game of the Year, I'm gonna be pissed. Like that's just because I enjoy playing it so much. And I don't know if that's just like I love those super crazy dexterity driven games. I don't know what it is, that feeling of finally defeating a boss. But it's going to drive me nuts. It might be a late night. We'll see. Brandon, we've talked about this several times on Frame Trap, but I wanted to put it on the list because I wanted to get your perspective on it. I wish I could get Isla on here to talk about her perspective too, because it's one of those times where I'm like, I'm not sure how this ally is going to like this game.
Yeah.
And you've been playing Shin Megami Tensei 5.
Yes. I brought 2 games with me to Florida. Florida is where my in-laws live. My 2.5-year-old had never been to Florida. He'd met his in-laws and spent lots of time with them, but had not been to their house. Nice. So I'm like, all right, this kid's gonna be running around. I'm gonna have to bring, all his stuff. So I'll only bring my PlayStation 5 and my Switch. And then I'm like in bed packing, and I'm just like, why am I gonna try to bring a PlayStation 5 on the plane? What bag am I gonna bring it in?
The PlayStation 5
with a stroller and a 2-year-old and all that. So I was like, all right, Switch, it's you and me. What do you got? And Metroid Dread and Shin Megami Tensei 5 really like bubbled to the surface. And I was like, I really want to jump into Metroid Dread. And I didn't finish Metroid Dread, but I actually played a lot of Super Metroid because I enjoyed my time with Metroid Dread so much. And I just hit a wall where I'm like, I'm going to have to spend a lot of time searching. And I don't know if that's really good GOTY search right now. I think I'd rather start a new game. And I had started Shin Megami Tensei 5 Run Around, and I was like, okay, that intro was, I like got my headphones on, and my father-in-law was like, what are you looking at? And I'm like, don't know if I can explain this to you right now. I'm in a tunnel. There's a lot of dust. Hold on, let me get back to you.
The end of Tokyo.
Shiny dust. I wonder where the dust is shiny. Oh, they explained it. Cool. Ben, I was really sad about Metroid because I'm like, God, I really want to just blow this game away and come in, having fought that final boss, really like getting into the story, finish a Metroid game finally. And then Shin Megami Tensei is like, welcome to the rest of your vacation. This is all you're going to want to play. And I think at one point I came back, I messaged you in Slack like the next day. I'm like, I tried it again, but that, or maybe try to go back. Something about the map in Metroid Dread is just hard. Going back and forth between the real world and the map just is too slow for my brain because I'm not that used to it. But SMT5 clicked with me so fast, and I am just coasting through that game. Not because it's not tough. Like, I've definitely had to reload save files.
Yeah.
There's definitely been times like, what's in this tunnel? Death. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I love that. But I mean, I thought that game was going to be so abrasive. I thought it was going to be confusing. I thought it's one of the reasons I've been afeared of the Xenoblade Chronicles series is I'm like, is this too much in terms of like, am I going to just be burnt? Like, wow, these battles just take so long. And I was a little scared because Persona, I kind of got, I just finished Breath of the Wild, and I'm like, man, and how many hours? I'm like, and Persona 5 just didn't click. And I think, Ben, the number one thing that I'm just like, why? I've played so many role-playing games. Why doesn't every role-playing game do this? But I can't, for people who have not checked out this franchise, but love turn-based role-playing games, I can't tell you how fun it is to have like an enemy be like, yo.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Yo. I didn't even ask to talk to you. What do you want? And it's just like, I noticed you're coming in to my turf, killing my friends. If you give me money, I'll do that. Or if I join your team or whatever. And just like, no, I'm going to kill. Like, fine, we'll fight then. Like, what was that about? Like so many fun, silly surprises that I thought were just going to be like, oh, that's neat. And it sure shakes up what could be an otherwise really repetitive experience. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, man, you just gave a lot of lore to this weird little waterfall area. Like, whoa, you made this little freeway overpass really special because I remember, it's like, oh, I finished that quest. Where do I turn that in? Oh, yeah, it's that little yellow guy that hangs out by that post. Like, it looks like such a Escape from New York, like, weird, desolate, Buckaroo Banzai looking just like wasteland. But, like, it was a surprise after 3, 4, 5 hours. I'm like, I'm still running around this first area.
Yeah.
Just trying to get all my demons. Once I discovered fusing, it was like, well, where does my old demons go? Oh, I got to get other. Oh, no. Like, I want to fuse all these things. I want to know, what all these different types are. And it feels like it factors directly into the same Pokemon obsession of just like, I want to get these things. It's fun to get them and find them. But once I have them, that's kind of where the fun stops for me with Pokemon. Yeah. I just want to get more things or level them up. But it's like, I have such distinct tastes in terms of like what I want in my party and why. I love that they talk when you level them up. Yeah, I leveled up. Yeah, I got this cool new thing. Like, hey, you're not too bad. Here's an item. Like, It's I wish Pokemon did half of what they're doing in this game, just in terms of like, oh, I'm still going on the fight with them. I didn't just put them into a computer. I didn't just turn them into ones and zeros, killing them? ?
Yeah.
It's I have a lot of questions about this world, but to me, Pokemon, it sometimes feels like a horror show. It feels like a weird apocalypse where everyone's obsessed with this thing and nobody, the villains are so stupid and transparent and clownish and. Get into this world and it's like, oh no, the absurdity totally makes sense. Like there was one early quest where it's like, these people follow me. I'm like, that's a little weird. And then like some other lady's like, you should kill her. And I'm like, well, that's also weird. And the game's like, make a decision. And it's like, well, both of these are horrible. What? And I'm like, so I'm making these calls being like, I don't normally make decisions like this. I watched trailers when it first came out. And I'm like, this game looks like a bunch of sand and a bunch of weird evil jerks. Like, why do I want to play this?
And that's correct.
And then you reviewed it and you were like, it's one of the hardest games I've ever played. And I'm like, why am I still attracted to this game?
Yeah.
And admittedly, Ben, I'm in the teens. I think I played for like 16, 18 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm not super far, but I don't care at all. Like
Yeah.
once I find a new enemy type, here's the next hour of this game is me learning, what does this thing do? Do I want it in my party? What can I fuse it with? Like, it's like when you fuse things and he gets the keyboard out and he's rocking and it's just like,
my God,
I just like
the
move
fusion
this,
cinematic
I just
is
move the switch over
amazing.
to Amanda and Amanda's like, what? And the
Yeah.
giant, like
Oh,
large
it's so
breasted
good.
statue just comes out and Amanda's like, what's happening right now? I'm like, wouldn't you like to know? You know, it's like, it's so weird and so cool.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like the flip side to that, Ben, the only negative thing I can say is it's hard, which is just fine, you know, but like you can kind of grind through it in the way that like I felt I could grind through Dark Souls and Bloodborne, not Sekiro. But those two, I definitely felt like, okay, I'm not flying through this game, but I feel like I'm getting there. Is that I don't care too much. Like you bump into some old friends and stuff, and like they're tying things back to the old world, and it's like, okay, like I don't feel a real need to save the world that these characters came from or really get to the bottom of stuff. 18, 20 hours. You know,
Yeah,
it's like,
no, but
it hasn't, you know, maybe I love apocalypses too much, but I haven't fallen in love with the world because everybody's so standoffish in a fun way. Like when Alice first got to Wonderland, you know, like all of you are crazy.
that reaction I think is actually different than what you think it is, because if you like don't care, you can make choices where you can be like, yeah, fuck you guys.
It
like,
seems like the world does, react, and it the game just winks at you in such a fun way. Like I love the little like moon-shaped dudes who just pop up in the back and they're like, hi, and it's just like, who are you? And then they escape, and it's like, cool.
Yeah.
You know, like there's so many neat, weird layers to it, and the way like all of them interact with you, having this voice with you the whole time, having him be kind of mean, and then you meet a character that's nice, and he's like, I don't trust her. It's like, well, I don't trust you. Be quiet. Like, and so there's just a lot of not clear decisions and moral quandaries, and I just was like, neat, a cozy RPG I can play through, and then I'm like, I love all of these people.
Yeah.
I'd be like, I like this guy. And Amanda's like, why? I'm like, I don't know. But he's cool, and I want him in my party.
This was something that I tried to touch on in the review, but it is so refreshing to have characters that aren't like designated to be bad guys, right? Like just normal side quest givers or random evens that you run into. Like so many JRPGs, it's like everyone needs help and you're the one to solve their problems. Whereas here, it's like they're going to try to manipulate you and cheat you, and like I love just this chance of running into dirt bags. I think it makes the world feel
And sometimes you
so
don't
much
care
more
about
real.
being manipulated. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'll go talk to people and I'm like, hit me with your best shot.
Yeah.
I don't care, you know. And the nice flip side of that is sometimes I'm like, okay, I'll give you this. Okay, this. Okay, hurt me. Okay,
Keep going. They keep going. Yeah.
Okay, you're in.
Yeah.
And then other times they're just like, I like your face. Fine, I'll be in your party. Like, oh, cool, thanks. It's just a very rewarding. The platforming's okay. There's a lot of places it looks like I can go. I'm like getting used to the kind of the language of where I can go. Running is fantastic. There are times where I could have fast traveled somewhere and I was just like, wee. I just like running around this world. It's neat. A little tough in handheld with the camera and everything, but fun world to run around. The restrictions surprised me a little bit on how many demons you can have. It took a while for that to really open up, you know, like
Yeah.
I guess
and
because of
you
fusion,
gotta
because they just
sacrifice.
vanish a lot, you know, and
Well, no, I mean the what you spend your glory on, like you can increase the number of demons you can carry.
But that
if you do
still levels, you know, you can't just keep doing that. I'll go back and you have a new one, okay,
Right.
or you gave me the ability
Right.
to do that again, because just love getting a whole party full of crazy dudes.
You mentioned the grinding, and something that I appreciate about the grinding so much is it's not really about like just outstatting the enemy through numbers. It's like grinding to get the tool that you need to overcome the thing, right?
Or
like,
you finally get a guy and they bring some, you know, element that you didn't have before, literal element, like literally lightning or fire or whatever. And you're like, oh, that spell's really great, and oh, that person hates that spell. You're cool. I'll keep you because you have that spell. And then you get a new person. You're cool because you have an umbrella, and that's neat. And then like 5 levels later, that umbrella guy gets fire spell, and you're like, oh, bye, fire guy. Neat. You know, it's like I know what that spell is, And it's not like a Final Fantasy thing where it's like, oh, neat, ice. Like, there's just a lot of weird abilities they have where it's like, what does this do? Like, oh, that's cool. You know, it's Ben, I love to coast through RPGs. It really takes a lot for me to slow down and be like, okay, let me not just, you know, blow past this. Let me really understand, like, what's powerful, what works. You know, if I'm going into a big boss fight, like how I can prep myself to know, like, I got my bases covered.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny game, Ben, because when I first, I wanted to get into it because the same reason I wanted to get Yaku is the same reason I want to play Life is Strange. I enjoy playing things that people that are close to me also enjoy a lot. And your praise of this franchise, and especially your praise of this game when it first came out, but it's almost like every time I heard something good, I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm going to bounce off this game. Like, I don't know if it just seems depressing. You know, it's like I don't play a lot of wasteland-ish games, but hooked. Again, there's how much, you know, time is so fleeting. And so it's like I have not really been able to spend as much time because when you feel like you understand a game, it feels like it's time maybe to sample something else on the GOTY flight. Yeah.
No, I'm glad to get your perspective because it's like when I praise SMT, it's like, okay, I'm coming at it from the perspective of somebody who already likes it, who already understands it. And so it's nice to get somebody from the outside to be like, actually, I didn't know how I was going to feel about this, and it's really cool.
It's not just a good RPG. It does stuff that it's like, man, I'm going to go back to other RPGs after this and be like, why
absolutely,
do the thing?
Yes,
you know?
Yes.
So
I really do feel like it is one of those, like, slightly pushing the genre forward type of games, which is neat. Blood, a game that I feel like kind of got some glowing media coverage. Like I saw an IGN review and it gave it like a 9 or something, but kind of faded into the background, I feel like, is The Forgotten City, which, correct me if I'm wrong, used to be a mod.
Yeah.
Right. I think it was, the Skyrim mod. You can kind of still get that sense of it, the way things are sometimes. Like, there'll be times where if you, like, walk up to somebody, from behind and start talking to them, and then you kind of get that, like, slow turnaround, and, like, their face, their body shifts towards you before they start talking and that sort of thing. And some other little bits. So, yeah, I think definitely, like, a small team that probably doesn't have a ton of experience. And so, like, there's some weird jank and stuff here and there. But it's an interesting game, and I actually played through, like, all of it yesterday. And it's so it's another time loop thing, but it's
hot these days.
Yeah, hot. But this is more narrative, more quest based, more like interpersonal puzzle solving kind of thing, and so the general setup is you just kind of wake up on the banks of this river. This woman's like, hey, there's another guy. He went up the hill and he hasn't come back. Can you go look for him? And you're like, okay. And then you go up to this shrine and you fall through this hole, and all of a sudden you're in this, old Roman city, and there's just a bunch of like golden statues everywhere. And then, long story short, you get pulled back into time, and you find out that this city has what's called the Golden Rule. So if anybody sins, then the gods' wrath will, turn some of these statues to life, and they'll turn the people into golden statues. So all the golden statues you see were once people.
Wait. So why do the statues come to life? Why not just turn the people gold?
Because they use like bow and arrows that shoot people.
Yeah, bow and arrow. See, no, that's reason enough.
And then
that's
what is
getting
hit by the arrow.
Getting hit by the arrow turns you into gold.
So the way the loop ends, so some of it is like the sins are like, it's very, again, the Skyrim bones is like, if you steal out of this chest that's owned by somebody, rather than stealing out of the chest that's not owned by somebody, right?
Can you put a bucket over their head and then steal?
I love the DM taking over, just like, what's the range on this bow?
Yeah.
What are we talking?
But or if you kill somebody or something like that, like, then that's like, okay, now that like the wrath is coming, and so what'll happen is the magistrate, he's the one that summoned you.
Okay.
So he'll run back to the summoning temple or whatever, and he'll do the ritual. and then you jump through the portal, and then you basically start the loop over.
I see. Okay. So how stringent is this sinning, right? Like,
This is the
What do you have in mind?
This is a huge moral point of the game, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but it is a very talky game, and it's one where I usually will let dialogue play out. But this one, there's just so much talking that I was just like, I'm reading this and then skip and then reading and then skip and then reading. And it's like
all the time.
There's still some conversation, so I would listen to the whole thing. But there's a lot of talking. But there are sort of these questions that come up as like, well, why is this a sin and why is this not counted as a sin? And that goes all the way through the full thread of the game of trying to understand what the heck even is this place? What's happening?
yeah.
And so there's a lot of this sort of like mystery and problem solving, and and there's some people that are missing, and so you kind of look for them. There's a funny thing to where there's this farmer who's right there when you come through the portal, and so the first time he's like, "Where did you come from?" And you go through this whole long conversation, and then as you do more loops, it's really funny because it's one of these things where it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I understand it from a gameplay standpoint, so you don't just waste a bunch of time. So a lot of these quests that you've already done, you walk through the door and you're like, hey, dude, I need you to do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and just have him set up this whole sequence of events, and then you run off and do the next part, the things that you actually want to do, the next things on your list. So that's really funny. Yeah, and the deeper you get into it, like the more turns it takes, and it's sort of and I think part of it too is like you're trying to, what you're assigned to do is you're trying to figure out who is going to sin and then stop them, which is also really funny because the way the magistrate wants you to stop them is like, I want you to kill them, and it's like, well, isn't killing them going to be a sin? It's like, no, because I'm the magistrate and that's the law, and so. Okay. So just figuring out all the rules of this and like learning, because it's again like the comparison of Majora's Mask, because it's not a gigantic space that you're in, but there is more to it than you first see. As you explore more and you get different keys and you figure out like, okay, how do I go into this place that has an enemy attacking me, but I don't have any weapons because the magistrate made everyone throw their weapons in a canyon. So it was like, how do I get a weapon? And so there's just answering some of those questions and dealing with people that are, not always trustworthy and all of that. But like I said, there's also sort of like, those janky kind of sort of. There's one moment where there's this bar, and a bunch of characters were in the bar because it's weird because some things will be like very quest based and like things won't happen until you walk up to a person and interact with them, and then other things where people will move from like their shops to the bar to their individual rooms or whatever. But this guy started having this conversation in the bar, and I'm like, where's the other person? I hear the other person. I see the subtitles for the other person. Where's the other person? And then I walked upstairs, and he was on the floor above. But they were having this conversation like they were right next to each other. And they were supposed to be right next to each other. It was just like one of those weird kind of Skyrim-esque pathing things where some guy just wound up upstairs for who knows what reason. Creepy. But he was close enough to trigger their little conversation.
Did you curse Todd Howard's name in that moment?
And then there's this kind of things where certain you walk by people and like every time you walk by them they repeat the little line of dialogue or whatever, or like you're just exploring a house and somebody's like, what are you doing over there? Stay out of my money. And like I wasn't gonna take your money, but thanks.
You mentioned it being very talky, and the whole setup for the world seems really interesting. But do you feel like the quality of the writing / the characters that you're meeting is all of that charismatic enough to really justify how much dialogue there is?
I go back and forth on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like it's not the best, but it's all right, and it's enough. There's enough there to where, like I said, like I just kept going until I finished it, and it's got multiple endings, but it's one of those things where it's got multiple endings, but actually there's an ending that really you want to get to, because if you do one of these other endings, you don't know half of what's going on in this game. So
I would like to do a callback to you talking about God of War at the beginning of this frame trap. Having just played through the Grand Theft Auto trilogy on the PlayStation 5, for better and for worse, there were a lot of moments where I'd replay a cutscene or something, and I would like drive to the place, and somebody would be like, "Let me tell you this story. Oh, we're here," and I'm like, "Well, that was maybe written poorly. I don't know. Like, is it bad writing that you didn't realize that it could take me 26 seconds
I feel like
to
that's
get
a common
from here
game
to there?"
problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was a common game problem in the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 era.
Yeah.
And again, playing games like Last of Us, Uncharted, like games that really prioritize like a very slow burn gameplay. God of War, it so rarely happened where it would be like, "Hold on a second, boy. Okay, let me pick up right where I left off. Anyway, when your mother died, blah, blah, blah." It was like, that was awkward. Like, they just seemed so well suited to that area. And I think that's like, just one of the things that really excels about the dialogue in that, which feels like you're like, okay, I'm standing in place and you've been going on for 4 minutes.
Well, the
this isn't working in the way I think maybe you want it to, or the way it should. I don't know.
The interesting thing about God of War is, like, it does happen sometimes where you'll be talking to Atreus and it's like, "Oh, we're doing this now," but it'll be like, "Oh, we're in a boat and we're talking," and it's just like, "Oh, we just reached right to," like, it kind of feels like
smoother than most.
Right.
Not perfect, but aware of itself in a way that not a lot of games do.
It feels like the awkwardness is almost contextualized by the world itself. Yeah.
Continue, Blood. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and too, like, a lot of the stuff is, somewhat optional, but, going through some of those options will sometimes clue you in onto something else, some other, part of the mystery. And I think it's interesting how it can be pretty organic, because, like, yes, you go straight from the farmer to the magistrate, and then he tells you, this quest, but then depending on who you end up talking to, you can go down this thread, or you go down that thread, and you kind of like feel your way through however you want. It doesn't feel like a strictly linear experience.
Yeah. It's one of those games that sounds like it's kind of interesting, but I don't know that it sounds so interesting that I would prioritize it above other things.
Right.
Like,
the nice thing though is, like I said, it's it's a weekend game.
Right.
Like I got all 4 innings in like 9 hours or something like that. So
always a plus.
And I think
Always a plus.
because of how much mystery and philosophizing and and puzzle solving and stuff there is, I think it is something like you don't want to like play this one weekend and then come back to it a week later and like, what was I doing? Like, it is better to like try to like plan it out so you get 2 or 3 nights and you get through it.
Speaking of getting through things, it is time to get through this HOTTAKE. That was a good reaction, Blood. It was a good woo. There's a nice pitch to that. This is inspired by God of War on PC, because I'm sitting there playing God of War. It's looking great on my computer. I'm playing it with an Xbox controller, which I get a kick out of. It's just the little things. And I naturally came to this question where I was like, we're getting major first-party games on PC. Obviously, God of War and other Sony games coming much, much later than their original release. But there are so many big first-party games coming to PC from both Microsoft and Sony. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, this God of War is at the top of the Steam charts right now. This has to be sending a good message.
Yeah.
Does it matter as much having a console as it did before? Like, I can't imagine Sony taking this approach, or even Microsoft taking this approach in previous generations, not counting Xbox One, of course. You get what I'm trying
Games
to say.
for Windows Live.
Right.
Well, even that is different, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah.
it's a very
That's
different
another
beast.
failure, but yeah.
It's a very different beast. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know. Like, do you feel that this has affected the console landscape in a way? Has it devalued having a console if you know that later on you're just going to be, or maybe even day of, you're going to be able to play these things on PC right away?
I think the 3 degrees are Xbox is getting less and less important. Microsoft's like, just do whatever you want. Please give us as much money as possible. We will make this experience as easy as it can be for all of you. Sony's like, well, there are rules, but yeah, we're kind of slowly in that direction. And Nintendo's like, consoles are the most important thing ever. Peripherals also very important. you should buy Ring Fit Adventure. You could buy all this other stuff. So those are like the 3 degrees to me. Like Nintendo and Xbox are like total opposites, where Sony's kind of somewhere in the middle. Like Sony's waited long enough that they're really cashing in on that.
Right.
And I think they kind of like Mario Kart 9. They were like, the longer we wait, the more of a payday we're going to get when we finally do put these exclusive games. And there's still some they haven't, that are totally going to come to PlayStation or totally going to come to PC someday and do really well.
But you have to follow the money, right? I mean, there's heavily circulated rumors that Sony's going to come out with a Game Pass competitor, right? And I'm sure they're paying close attention to PC sales of these kind of flagship games, right? Like, eventually, does it get to a point where it's like, well, like, why not? Why not lean into PC even more?
Yeah, I think.
Keep them guessing.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more clear that like the PC market it's just a different market. Like there are people like us that will have a PC and a console, but a lot of people are going to pick and choose, or like even if they have a big PC, like they're going to have a console in the living room, and they would, rather, not sit in a desk chair all day. They would go out and sit on the couch and that kind of thing. I think. I mean, with my case, the point is like, my PC has been in the shop and having all these troubles and stuff, and just trying to figure out what part is failing.
Yeah.
And you look at, the price of a console is even as high dollar and as hard to find as they are. Mm-hmm. You can't get close to building a PC that matches those specs,
right? That
has that kind of hard drive in it, that has ray tracing options and all of that. It's not going to happen. Your graphics card is probably going to cost you more.
Mm-hmm. There is a bit of mystique with the next generation though that I wonder if has been quelled a bit, because like we're a bunch of doofuses every gen, at least the gens that I've done with all of you doofuses, where we just like open up a box and we're like, what is this? And it's like companies are expecting people to spend hundreds of dollars on this. And like, it's not really until we plug the thing in do we know like, what is an Xbox Series X? What is a PlayStation 5? And a lot of consumers right now are kind of being forced to not deal with any of that. They're like, here I am over a year into this gen, and like I don't own, and as days go by, I'm questioning whether I really want a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X, because I'm playing a lot of really amazing games on my PC. Still have my Switch. I'm okay. It sucks because these games look really fun, and I do want it. And I wonder, like, as those months go by, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years from now, when like, oh, here's the PlayStation 6, here's the Xbox, wiggity woggity, whatever. And then you have these kids growing up now that are like, well, now that I'm like out of college and have my own budget, you kind of trained me not to need this that bad. Like I think I might upgrade my PC or something, or like take a more step-by-step approach than really put all my eggs in this basket of like, I got to get this one system. Yeah. Otherwise I can't play, Returnal. And it's like, well, it's fine. It's okay. Like I've so many other things that I can check out. What did Huber post? 550 shows came out last year or something, original IPs or whatever. It's just insane how much awesome entertainment there is. And so it's like, I wonder if Spencer and Xbox crew and the Sony crew are kind of scared that they're like, uh-oh, did we just tell consumers that they can live without, this thing that we really want people not to live without?
Yeah, but that's I think you're touching on something that is so fascinating with the ease of accessibility with gaming in general, and how like pliable it is, because back in the day it was like, you want to play this Sony game, you have to get this thing, you have to buy a disc, right? Whereas now, like, not only are things coming into PC, which is kind of the focus of this discussion, but then you have subscription services, you have game streaming, you have like on Amazon, you can just like get free game. They're like, here you go, you have a Twitch Prime, here's some free games, right? Like, it's just like the you could play games on your phone, right? And so because there are so many entry points to play something, I'm wondering if that like big exclusivity is mattering less and less. And like, I'm just spitballing here, but I have to imagine from Sony's perspective where it's like, okay, let's say things are selling really, really well. We're building up this audience on PC. You know, when the sequel to this thing comes out, do we shorten that window that we release it on PC?
Sure.
I mean, that seems logical, right? Just hypothetically.
Right, but I think I mean, case in point, God of War, like, I think a lot of those sales are double dipping.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, there's a lot of people there that haven't had access, but there's a lot of people that, I'm gonna play that again. I want to see it at max specs. Yeah.
And that is the other side of this coin that I wanted to bring up, because playing God of War on PC, of course I was going to play God of War Ragnarok. Of course I was excited for it. But God of War on PC has like kind of put it at the forefront of my mind now,
right?
Where I'm like, oh God, like I can't wait for this. Like it's really kind of burned it in there. And it's like, I almost feel like I'm like watching an ad. You know what I mean?
You've been played, Ben.
Right. Where it's like you're using this release of a game to remind me how much I love this thing. Yeah.
It's tactical. It's like they're moving further down the battlefield, and they know we're going to put up these trenches.
Yep.
That we know they're going to earn.
Yep.
And so that's why one of the things I'm so happy for Microsoft. I'm so happy that Game Pass has worked out really well, because it's just sunshine and rainbows and unicorns all around. It's like it's working out for you. We got we have more free games than we could ever possibly play. Like, hooray! But at the same time, there's not a lot of wiggle room. Like, it would be very drastic and I think severe and like wouldn't play well to the community for them to just be like, well, Game Pass is over. Like, that didn't work. People are like, wait a minute. Like, we got so used to that, and Microsoft's kind of known for that. I'd be surprised if Sony goes full on to where Microsoft is. I think maybe they'll just kind of dip their toes and be like, well, yes, this one Steam thing didn't work out. Doesn't mean there's going to be a new PlayStation exclusive on PC every month, or like, yes, Game Pass is working really well, but ours is still going to be very conservative and weird, just because we want to wiggle. Like, we don't want to totally jump into the deep end and then not be able to move anywhere. We're just like, okay, well, now we're stuck with this service. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the sales numbers, basically tell it all, right? Because as you're saying, with Xbox, there's pretty much nothing that comes on Xbox that's first party that doesn't also come to PC, right? Like, I can't think of anything.
No, I can only think of the other way around, because like Age of Empires 4 is
right,
PC
or
only.
Flight Simulator had a huge delay, but they're like, obviously,
Sure.
like you're gonna have to build a completely different thing for the Xbox, right?
Right.
And they're doing record numbers.
Yeah.
PS5 is doing record numbers, so it's not hurting Xbox.
Wasn't there a report of how beneficial having two SKUs for this new generation has been for Microsoft?
Yeah, so it's really
they could be doing record numbers.
Well, they can't do anything more than what they can produce right now.
true.
So that's where the real interesting thing is. Like, what is the ceiling? Nobody will ever know.
I just have to, like, with the way technology is moving, I almost think we're getting to a point where it's not so much about the box that you're playing on. It's like the branding behind what you're playing.
Yeah, for sure.
Where like,
well, and the Samsung TVs this year they're starting to implement a game hub. So you just have a Samsung TV and you'll be able to boot up a Stadia game on your TV. You don't need to have an extra box. You don't need to have your laptop plugged into it. It's just right on your TV.
Right.
And I'm sure that eventually xCloud is going to come to TVs like that. And that'll be a whole other group of people playing Xbox games.
Right. Like, I think comparing it to the television streaming side of things, right, where HBO Max came later than a lot of other streaming services, but I'm like, oh man, I really want HBO Max. It's got original programming. It's got, DC stuff. It's stuff that I want so badly that, like, when it comes to like, oh, maybe we need to save some money, let's prune some services. Like, I want to keep HBO Max because it's got a lot of things. They was releasing movies day and date with theater in 2021 and all of that stuff. I wonder if it's going to get to the point where, like, for Sony, it's less important that you buy a PS5 and more of that, like, we have the things that you want and you can only get it by paying our subscription service. Like, if we're moving away from console wars and getting into service wars, basically.
Yeah, I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. I will be curious if we ever.
But I don't think we're that far away.
You know,
I really don't.
You know what I could see having more of a subscription service and really benefiting from that, Ben, is like PSVR 2. Because what am I doing if I'm Sony and you own a PlayStation VR 2 and I have a new PlayStation VR game that just came out and I'm like, you gonna buy this? It's like, give it to that person. You know, it's like, get everyone who owns a PlayStation VR 2 playing every single VR exclusive game you have on this get them going to Twitter and freaking out, you know, throw VR games at them if you really want that platform to gain traction and be successful. Or if you want to be considered a leader or a competitive, if you want Zuckerberg to be like, Sony got another one again, you know, they got Insomniac in their pocket and they can make whatever cool VR games they want. Just seems strange that if I'm like, I forked over all this money for the PSVR 2 and the controller, everything, I don't have any money left for games.
Well, I feel like that proposition works in so many different directions, right? Because let's say if you're somebody that's not that interested in VR, but you're again, this is all just theory, right? But you're somebody that's paying for like PlayStation Game Pass. Yeah. And they're like, if you have PlayStation Game Pass, you get all these PSVR 2 games free. You're like, well, I'm already paying for this thing. Maybe I should get this hardware. Or vice versa, where it's like, oh, I bought the headset. Maybe I should pay for... And it's just like...
Because once you get on the VR train, you don't want it to stop. Like, once you get in... Like Oculus does that well in their store, where they're like, oh, just got an Oculus, want like 50 free games, go nuts. And there's almost kind of like a playlist that you just naturally go through. Beat Saber, all the, you know, like... there's good trials and they're very smart at like, you want to have fun and you only have 2 hours and your friends are over. Like, we get it. And so, yeah, that could easily play into that whole vibe of just like, I don't want the party to stop. I want to go to that water cooler with 12 VR impressions as opposed to like that one cool $60 Insomniac game that I can't beat because my brother's borrowing the PSVR 2 or whatever.
I think about Xbox Live, particularly during the 360 era, and how that kind of changed expectations for all online services to follow, right? And like you saw PlayStation Network spin off out of that. You know, you have Nintendo Switch Online. I wonder if we're kind of at that moment now with Game Pass and then whatever Sony introduces, where like it's going to kind of be this new thing that is as important as the console itself in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a whole different thing than saying, you know, whether or not the console will go away because...
Right.
Because...
Sure.
Yeah, because like, you know, the cloud stuff, it's still very internet connection dependent, which they have no control over. They're not going to be able to improve in many meaningful ways. So, yeah, whether you're playing on the PC or Xbox or PlayStation, like, you're still going to want a box. You know, there'll be people that don't care and they will play things, you know, but there's going to be, you know, a lot of those just high-end experiences or whatever that you're still going to need the box one way or another.
I'm sorry, for some reason, I got the image in my head and it made me laugh of the idea of like an Assassin's Creed television. It's like all the Assassin's Creed games are built into this TV.
Like,
and
that's
it even like looks like the Assassin's Creed, you know, like the little helmet or whatever. Like, it's funny to me.
But
built-in games.
When I say like, oh, it's going to replace the console, I think it's an oversimplified way of trying to articulate the real point of what I'm saying. Maybe you made me realize that like not necessarily it's going to make those boxes go away, but those boxes become more of like an option rather than like the essential thing that you need to experience the game. It's like if you want to, because that's how Microsoft is basically doing it now, right? Where it's like, this is an avenue that you can take amongst multiple avenues. I think that seems realistic.
It's funny. It's like, what do you play in an Xbox game? What do you play in that Xbox game on?
Right.
Like,
my phone.
Oh,
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Interesting conversation. Are we ready for some emails?
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Our first email comes in from Brandon. Hello, everyone. As 2022 gets underway and the Last of Us Goties and the Last of the Goties get decided, wow, and the talk ramps up being all about the anticipation of what's to come, I'm curious if you all have anything on your radar you're not seeing much talk about across the internet, as the Elden Ring, Horizons, God of Wars, Suicide Squads, etc. are getting all the rage. I'm curious about the games you've got a quiet eye on. For me, Replaced and Evil West are two that seem really Replaced and Evil West are two that seem really cool, and I'm not seeing many others hyping up. How about you? Thanks for taking this email. If you do, a belated Happy New Year, and stay easy, fellow allies.
Weird West. I was just studying for the podcast, and so I don't recall what Evil West is at all. There's too many Wests.
There's a lot of Wests out there for sure.
Unpacking is like always the one that I just want to throw out there in case that's not on your radar. Unpacking, I haven't heard of that.
But they're talking about upcoming, right? They're talking about new 2022 games.
2022 games, yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably coming on other consoles.
I'm gonna look through this list.
That's cheating.
Well, I have to look through the list. I'm always gonna be.
No. Yeah, Weird West is soon, which is a bummer because that's like tactical Western, but it's a little too cartoony for me. There's a lot of fun. We just did the Q1 preview, so there's a lot of, and you were on that, Ben. There's a lot of fun Divinity-ish games, Path of Exile-ish games of various
Baldur's Gate 3 is
complexity.
Would be a good one to throw out there just because waiting for the full release of that.
But if that's too far away for you, there's other games of that ilk that are coming out. I think are all on PC, I would imagine. Trying to think if there's any cool DLC or something coming up. God, I never played that Tsushima DLC. Huber's gonna be so mad.
This isn't like a super small game, but I think bears mention is I feel like the world has kind of forgot about Gotham Knights. It's
right.
not when you think about like top anticipated 2022 games. I don't think it comes out the same way, and I'm really curious to see how that turns out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know some people have been down on it, but I'm still curious about Forspoken and what the heck that game is.
I think Forspoken is a very good pick. Yeah. Good picks.
See how it all.
Forspoken seems like a juggler. Seems like one of those games where you're just like, man, it's just fun to knock these enemies around because there's so many things you can build upon, and I'll do the big spell. Fable kind of reminded me of that, whereas there was just a really great management between AoEs and single targets. So I wanted a bunch of things to rush at me because then I would take a second to conjure some big thing and then do another thing on top of that. I'm hoping Forspoken is like that. We're just I light it on fire and then I do a thing, not just because it's the line of abilities I have, because it's also really fun to watch because that game is very pretty.
Metal Slug Tactics.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Triangle Strategy.
Triangle Strategy is a great pick.
Because I hope I don't do the same thing I do with Bravely Default 2, where I played it for 2 hours and was like, eh. Ben, you've reviewed so many RPGs that I was following you through time. I'm I'm playing the RPG Ben just finished.
Yeah.
And I just did, I don't know how you finish all of these things because I, made about 4 hours in Bravely Default 2. That was Brad did that though, right?
I did. I have not finished Bravely Default 2.
But I was just on his coattails and I was like,
sometimes this is why I go through lists. Sometimes, even if I don't remember what the crap this game is, there's something that's very enticing about Cursed to Golf.
Sure.
I want to check that game out.
What's the band game?
Weirdo,
where there's
game.
the real band that's actually a band that's
the
Hyperlight team
something.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that comes together.
We are A-OK. No, I don't remember.
Something like that. Yeah, that's their website, but I don't think it's the name of the game. Yeah.
Our next email comes in from Jared. Hello, Ben and Allies. So recently I've been able to play some games over the holidays with my 8-year-old son. He absolutely loves Halo Infinite, and most recently I introduced him to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. He's still pretty early, but so far he absolutely loves everything about this game. Whether it's seeing him take out an enemy camp, beat a shrine, and just traversing the world, it's so rewarding watching him experience this amazing game. It's also been a great reminder for me how special this game is and how so many things just click when it comes to the open world and exploration. My son picked it up and it instantly hooked him. Have you had a similar experience where you've introduced a friend or loved one to a game for the first time? Since Breath of the Wild is almost 5 years old, Jesus. It's almost like I'm getting to experience the game again through his eyes and made me remember just how much I love this game. We'd love to hear your thoughts and see what similar examples you might have. Bonus question, do we see Breath of the Wild 2 get released this year? I say yes. I hope so. Go ahead.
You just tickled me when you played Bully. When was that, 6 months ago, 8 months ago?
Yeah.
I was like, really? really?
I know. I didn't.
And I didn't really. I mean, I recommended it
Yeah.
all day, every day, but I didn't
Bully
know
is
you
one
were
that I
going
need
to jump
to-
into it.
Bully is one I need to get back to.
Yeah, it made me happy because there's Bully 2 rumors. I'm like,
Yeah.
Hmm.
I had some affinity for Pikmin growing up, but it was really like sitting down and playing those games with my wife that like turned that enthusiasm up to 11. And I think with her, I was able to appreciate it so much more than I did in the past.
Yeah, I don't have anything that's recent like this, but yeah, one of the things that's interesting is that my wife really, really loves Medal of Honor Frontline.
Yeah, you
and
said that before. That's right.
Yeah, she's devoured that
Great
game many
soundtrack.
times. Yeah, it does have a really good soundtrack, and recently when I got the retro tank and all this stuff, she's suddenly like starting to ask me again, like, "Will you hook up Medal of Honor Frontline sometime?" It's been years since she's played it, but yeah, she's itching to do it again.
Amanda usually will play a game and be like, "That was neat." She put a little more time, not so much with the sequel, but put a little more time in the first Dragon Quest Builders than I was expecting. I'd come back and she was still kind of plucking away at that. And we would play that on PS4. She might have played that on Switch. I can't remember. But second one's a little more complex and the characters were a little weird. You know, like she was just like, all right, it's a little too much. Because she is more of a reader than a gamer. And so it is a rare thing when I can like really hook her into something. So plays Hearthstone every day.
Wow.
But yeah.
I truly have like no idea what the hell is going on with Hearthstone. One of those games, like one of my biggest gaming obsessions of the last decade, and now I have like, I couldn't be more of a stranger to
Right.
it.
I know her so well, I can tell that, They're like, hey, did you change his diaper?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's the Hearthstone,
Yep. Nice. Our last email comes in from Danny, who says, "Hiya, too long TLDR. I still haven't played Sekiro because I was waiting for the October DLC, like in the previous Souls releases. I didn't want to relearn the game 8 months later." I thought that was just such an interesting perspective because I get where you're coming from.
Right.
Of course, Sekiro DLC never happened, so now I'm wondering, what should I play first, Sekiro or Elden Ring?
Oh.
I think you
Yes.
should play Elden Ring first.
Probably
I
go
see
to
where you're
Elden
coming
Ring,
from.
yeah.
Yeah.
Not because I don't love Sekiro. I adore Sekiro. And this may not matter to you. Maybe you want the opposite of what I'm about to say, which I could also understand. But I think there's something kind of magical of discovering, because Souls games are all about discovering things as the world is discovering them. And you kind of
Right.
get that like enchanted feeling of like, oh, none of us knew this, but now we know this. Whereas like Sekiro is a game that is so solved and it'll be new to you, but I think that community aspect might be a little less emphasized, if that makes sense.
Right. Oh yeah, they're all going to be playing Elden Ring.
Yeah, exactly. They're all going to be playing Elden Ring. And like,
That's a good point.
you're going to get in there, and if you manage to play it like right at release, you're going to see all those summon signs, and just like tons of messages. And I think that stuff is exciting.
Yeah, I also think that there's less of that in Sekiro in general as well, and also they play very differently. So I think you might as well get into Elden Ring, which seems to play a little bit more in a familiar terms like a Dark Souls,
Right.
than Sekiro, which has a totally it has a totally different emphasis. It's like there's still the core of the like dodge and counterattack and get better, but it feels like a very different game.
That might actually be it's a good point that you bring up, Blood, because it might be you might have to learn less with Elden Ring, and so it'll allow you to kind of get into it and ride it out maybe more easily. What do you think, Brandon?
Writing it out, I like that. That's
Yeah.
a good Elden Ring thing. I was gonna say just from somebody who got beaten body and soul by Sekiro, ran away screaming and crying. I would, when I let the kind of spoiler floodgates open, I would every now and then after, I'm like, okay, I'm probably not going to beat this game. So I'm curious to see later parts. And I would see bosses and stuff. And I'm like, I can't even believe what I'm looking at. I can't believe the size, of what's happening and the scale of the battle that it's
Brandon,
of the environment that those battles are happening on.
Somebody beat one of those bosses blindfolded on AGDQ this past weekend.
But it's like Spider-Man. It's like if Spider-Man and Dark Souls like got together, you know, like just seeing how quick they can move and just really just stuff lighting on fire and just environments changing so dramatically. I don't think that satisfaction is going to go away. I think you hit it, you nailed it with the zeitgeist. Like get into the thing that's popular right now, and then those crazy bosses, all that late game stuff is waiting for you. It was a bummer. There were some of those bosses I watched that's like, oh, I wish I'd gotten that far because look at that thing. Like, just really, really cool. I would be a privilege to be killed by that thing.
Sekiro is a humbling game in many aspects because I remember coming back to it. We were shooting something and I was playing it again and just getting like absolutely owned. And it's like, I've already beaten you. Like, I know I can do this. I feel like I've never played this game before. Yeah. And so getting re-humbled is a fun experience.
Re-humbled.
Yeah.
That's a sequel to Returnal. So called Re-humbled.
That's what they.
Returnal might humble me tonight.
Yep.
That's what they should call the remaster.
Getting humbled tonight.
Getting humbled tonight. Thank you to everybody who wrote into Frame Trap. The email address is askeasyallies@gmail.com. Once again, that is askeasyallies@gmail.com. Thank you so much to Brandon Jones and Daniel Blunworth. Until next time.